Welcome to this week's podcast interview. I brought on Evan Renfro. Evan, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Give listeners a background. Where do you live and what do you do?
Yeah, currently my wife and I, with our son, we live outside of Dallas in a town called Rockwall. I'm a fitness nutrition coach. I've been a trainer and coach for about 10 years now. I do that. I have my own coaching business and enjoying that.
What got you into the fitness industry? And the reason I ask is because I know so many health and fitness professionals. As my own I guess I'm an athlete for just the things that I do, but I love pushing myself in the physical realm because I believe the mind-body connection. But why did you get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the catalyst to it all was growing up overweight. Initially it started with pretty much, I guess, what we considered an eating disorder. Developed a terrible relationship with food, had a pretty low self-esteem. So naturally, a solution to that was learning more about wellness, nutrition, exercise, all those things. So that kind of stemmed into what became a passion. I started to try things out on my own, and once I saw the results of them, naturally having a heart to help others, I started to help as many people as I could that were in a similar situation. That kind of blossomed into a career, you could say. But started with that.
Were you overweight then?
Yes. Yeah. When I was younger, I was overweight. I never really understood. I didn't really have a great handle on nutrition. I always kind of saw it as this thing where food just makes you fat. So, genetically, naturally, I guess I was a little bit heavier than some of my friends and classmates. So over time, kind of, adopting that identity of being overweight, kind of led me to having a poor relationship with food.
So then was it in your adult years that something clicked and you realized, okay, I don't want to live this way anymore?
In terms of going a more sustainable route, yes. Because when I was younger, like I said, I took those extremes. I kind of adopted that poor relationship with food by way of just not eating. There was a time on the back end of like middle school age and high school age. I was an athlete. I still played sports and played football, ran track and things. But I would still I would skip meals because I felt that if I ate, I would be fat, and if I didn't eat, I would lose weight. So it wasn't until the adult years that it started to form into a more productive approach where I started to learn more about nutrition, the things that actually fuel your body for the demand, and how it's really habit based, and there's usually an underlying component to why we abuse food or whatever the case is. So.
Right. And I think what you touch on there is very important. It's kind of this punish reward system because you can give your opinion, but I am not on board with the whole, eat really strict, whatever, and then have a cheat day, because I think that's about binging. And why can't you just have moderation or a balance and like have that piece of chocolate or have a piece of cake? Don't eat the whole damn cake.
Right.
But can you touch on this whole punish reward system?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And I think, honestly, it defeats the purpose because I would say at the end of the day, like our goal isn't to be in a certain shape for a short time. We want to be well. We want to live and enjoy the things that we enjoy doing even more. So to have that optimized performance, to be in the condition that we feel is ideal for us, it has to be a matter of something that's sustained. And I feel like those extreme measures, they lend to this idea of, I've broken my diet or I've gotten off course. So, it's like you said, that punishment reward system. I'm definitely a fan of treating food a certain way. When I coach clients, we have to, I think, first look at the way we view food. If it's something that is off limits, or, I can have this category, but I can't have that category like most diets will do. Again, I think that defeats the purpose. I think, treating it well and having a good handle on it is, to me, like the core, the foundation of any well-rounded nutrition plan.
Yeah. I mean, I think we could go on a tangent there as well. I've never been into diets or the fads because I don't believe and I don't have the health and, I'm not certified in think of that stuff, but from my own experience, that stuff isn't sustainable. And I think what you really said there was figuring out the reason in your relationship with food, because it's not all the external things that people are seeking. It's figuring out that internal thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And personally, like, growing up thinking food was evil, right? Food just made me fat. In my mind, like food was the problem. But it wasn't until later on that I took the time to dive in and figure out like maybe where my weaker points were, like where my stronger areas were, and kind of leveraging the things I was good at, and working on the areas of weakness. And I
Yeah.
think that's important.
What you just said there reminds me of one of my most favorite. He's a Canadian. He's a wealth consciousness coach. And so he deals with a lot of people and their money, and kind of like diet and food and this. It's the food isn't an issue. The money isn't the issue. The lack of, or the this punish reward. It's that underlying those deep internal limiting beliefs, more or less. So you thought food was evil, but if you could change it to, food is food fuels me and food nourishes my body, and finding the positive, right?
Right. Yeah. Because anything in excess can be a problem, right? But anything, I feel you hit the nail on the head. Like
Yeah.
that thing is not the issue. It's the way we approach it. It's the perspective that we have on it. And for some people maybe it's alcohol, for some people maybe it's food, for some maybe it's drugs. But I think like having the right perspective of whatever that thing is that you struggle with, like, gives you the authority over it instead of always being kind of held down by it.
Yeah. And something we chatted with previously that I really want to talk about is this whole learning from your journey, and that we are resilient. So, I don't know how much you want to share of different experiences you've gone through, but touch on this whole resilience.
Yeah, no, I'm a firm believer that as humans we are adaptation machines, meaning that like we have the opportunity to progress, to grow from certain seasons of challenges and difficulties and trials, and we have an opportunity to really shape the, I guess, the person we become through it. And I feel like resilience in that is always having this understanding that, like, you've probably heard it before, but life isn't happening like to you, and you have an opportunity to, I guess, navigate it in a certain way. So being resilient and kind of sharing a little bit on my story. My wife and I, a little over a year ago, it was last April, we lost our son. We were at 31 weeks, and we had an emergency C-section, and it was a placental ruption. So, two of the most absolutely difficult days of my life, and it will always be hard. And there's always going to be this agonizing pain. But since then, it's been every day is an opportunity to really shape the way that I view life. If I feel like I'm a victim, and things are happening to spite me, then I'm really locked by that mindset. And if I look at it in a different way and say that, whatever I have access to, whatever season of life that I'm in, whatever things are happening that are beyond my control, I can still determine how I respond. And to me, that's kind of where resilience starts, is choosing to respond and looking at the situation as objectively as you can. Being that we've experienced probably the hardest thing we ever will, and something that I can't even quite describe how incredibly painful and hard it will always be. It's brought us closer together. It's brought us closer in our relationship with the Lord, like our faith is stronger. I feel I have a greater level of empathy for people, because I feel that when you experience such a deep level of hurt, then you have that relatability, and there's a sense of compassion. But more importantly than just wanting to sit in kind of the sorrow and sulk, I want to help people to maybe change the perspective, and I want to help people to realize that they are resilient. So hopefully that makes sense.
Well, for sure. And it's actually Tony Robbins who says life is happening for you, not
Right.
to you. And I love that, because that is the whole victim or victor mentality. And I feel like the majority of the population sits in this victim mentality. That happened to me. My boss is an asshole to me, whatever it may be. But it's kind of like, no. But your situation, that example, I mean, that is tough and grief. And how were you able to overcome that and step into this different perspective and become resilient from that?
Yeah, I think part of it, it's never something that, like, people have different, I guess, different wording for things, but it's never something that I'll get through or get over. It's not something that I want to, right? It's something that he's always going to be my son. And, we've recently just finalized the adoption of our son now. He's 2 years old. So that was a blessing that was unexpected. And I think, like, if I'm always jaded because of what's happened, then I'm never open to the joy or the opportunity that is ahead, because I always kind of have this very calloused lens in which I view the world. And on the other end of that, kind of to answer the question, it's something that, in my mind, there can't be anything harder than that. Like, as far as pain and just the weight of the emotion that comes with that, there, in my mind, there's nothing to fear in terms of what else could happen. Knowing that we've already, like, lived that, it makes everything else seem a little bit less intimidating. So I think that kind of gives the confidence and courage, and, I guess, the boldness to progress and to try new things, and to, venture out and to really become the person that you feel you should be. Like, my business is maximize self, and I think the really the root of that whole idea is becoming the best version of ourselves. And, I think that requires getting out of our comfort zone and taking a step out in faith and all these other things, but just continuing to refine ourselves. And like I said, like, we're adaptation machines. And I feel that when we're put in a situation with some sort of challenge or obstacle, we have the opportunity to progress from it.
Yeah. I love that. And that definitely comes down to mindset. And that's why I continually preach, and everything I do is getting outside of your comfort zone. Because if people stay in this mediocrity, this just, it's stable, this is comfortable, you won't grow, and you won't adapt, and you won't, I don't think can you be resilient if you're stuck in your comfort zone going through life's motions?
I don't feel you can. I feel like it defeats the definition of it, right? So,
Right. Well, something else you brought up with me that I'd love you to explain is this whole idea of the feedback loop, and that every day is a choice. So what do you mean by that?
yeah. So, first, I'm not an expert in, psychology or the mind, but it's something that I'm very interested in, and I think it shows up quite a bit in having, um, like we talked about, grown through some experiences that I think otherwise, like, maybe I wouldn't have, if I hadn't
Yeah.
had such an interest in the human mind and how malleable it is. And there's a great deal of plasticity to the brain, and I think that, understanding that it's basically recognition of patterns, I guess, is a simple way to put it. So, like, if there's a trigger for you, if something's always kind of rubbing you the wrong way or agitating you, or, you know maybe for me it's having road rage and being in traffic with dumb drivers that surround me. But yeah, like, I have a choice in that, and I can let them ruin my mood or my day or whatever the case is. And with it being a feedback loop, it's the whole idea of neurons that fire together wire together, so they kind of pair, right? So there's a cause and effect, there's an action and a reaction. So if someone cuts you off, if your immediate response, it's been that way for years, is to get angry, right? Yeah, exactly. And, I actually grew up with an anger problem. I had a very short temper. And, like, I lashed out at people. I lost my temper more often than anyone should. So that's something that I've worked through, but realizing that, before, something would have ruined my entire day, something that happened that was outside of my control. Maybe it was a sense of entitlement. I don't know, dumb kid, angry at the world, I guess. But, before, like I said, it would ruin my entire day. And then working through it, kind of, I guess, realizing it and understanding it, then it would kind of collapse that time to maybe a few hours, and then eventually minutes. And then eventually I would recognize it, like, maybe in the moment. I wouldn't even be angered by that thing, because I'd realize it's out of my control, move on. But yeah, in the beginning, it would be this catastrophic thing. And then eventually it's something that I've worked through. So, long answer to a short question, that feedback loop of, you have the option to respond a certain way, as opposed to just the emotional reaction in that time.
Yeah. And I think road rage is a perfect example. And I catch myself some days I'm kind of like, oh, what an asshole, right? But other days, if somebody wants to ride my ass and then go around me and I won't play the game, right? I can be an aggressive driver. I know how to get from A to B. But is it worth giving that person my emotional control? No.
Right.
And so when I let them around me, I'm like, hey, that person's in a hurry, because we don't really know what they're going through. Maybe there's been an
Exactly.
accident, they're going to the hospital. Who freaking knows? And it doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
But I would be, I don't know, I love psychology too. And so it would be fascinating to me to understand why so many people have road rage,
Yeah. I
right?
think to me, like my kind of assumption, and this is just purely my own, like, I guess, in the moment, kind of assuming a certain thing is, like, I think a lot of people are selfish. Their day and their time is more important than others, and again, that's just my own assumption. I don't know every single person that is around me on the road, but we can easily adopt that frame of mind that we're in a hurry. Our day is the most important. Like our tasks, our to-do list. Like we kind of tune everything else out, and we focus so much on ours. And I think that can make us very aggressive. It can make us rude, inconsiderate, all the things that we don't like in other people. That's why I say having more of an awareness, looking at things objectively, and knowing that we can respond to them in a certain way instead of letting that initial emotion dictate what we do.
Yeah. No, I think that's key. And it triggered something for me, that on the flip side of the road rage, when you do have that kind driver that lets you in, in the space where you're like, I'm trying to merge, or oh, I messed up and I need to exit. And so there are kind drivers out there. You just have to look
Sure.
for them.
Yeah, exactly.
So then, question for you: do you have a morning routine, or what do you do to stay in this mindset of looking objectively and staying resilient and doing the things you do?
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, I would say yes. I have it very, structured, and it's perfect. Um, I have I have a loose routine that I follow now because it's being adjusted. Um, Before we had a 2-year-old in our home, things were much different than they are now. But yeah, I would say for the most part, my biggest thing that I try to protect is really two things, and time for my mind and time for my body. And I like to start my day before my tasks begin. So to me, that just means like waking up and giving myself time before I have any appointments or sessions or anything that is like I'm expected to be in a place or do something. Like I want to have my time before the day is hijacked, basically. But yeah, I like to have time. For me, it's like I begin my day with like prayer, and I'm reading the Word, and I have time to kind of really focus on like what I would like to accomplish that day, instead of I'll kind of paint the analogy, the times that you've maybe slept through your alarm or hit snooze and you wake up and like everything is in such a hurry, you feel like you're just constantly putting out fires and your day is hijacked.
Yeah.
So on the other end of that, I feel if I can get my day started on my terms, more or less, it makes me more optimized to respond a certain way because I've taken care of me and I can be my best self in those situations.
Well, and I think the key there is self-care, because if you're not filling up your own cup, what do you have to give others? And
Yeah.
I know for women especially, that seems to be so difficult, and I don't think it's selfish at all. I think it's actually necessary to do
Right.
you. It's that whole oxygen mask example, right?
Yeah.
Cliche as it may be, but really if
It's
and you
true.
gave a perfect example that if you're not doing that in the morning, your day is quote hijacked. Well, who
Mm.
the hell wants to start on a hijack day? That
Right.
sucks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. So then I have to ask you, what do you want listeners, what is a key takeaway from this conversation?
I think the big thing, for me, and the thing that I try to coach clients on, and really tell anyone who will listen, is like this understanding that we talk about resilience, and I have my shirt. Everything is a choice, right? Like we have an opportunity to respond a certain way, and to me, this kind of parallels with the idea of extreme ownership. If you're familiar with it, like really like accept everything as your own fault, as your own responsibility, and I think
Mm.
that is like the starting point to being able to make the change, or to really give you a sense of power, a place of power in changing the circumstance, versus like we talked about before, the whole victim mentality, where if it's always someone else's fault, you have no ability to change it. So I think like those two ideas are kind of parallel in my mind, like the level of resilience that regardless of the difficulty of the season, or, if it's a great season, if things are going your way, and like that's an opportunity for you to fast track progression. Like we are quite literally adaptation machines. And then on the other end, like I said, like we have that choice and an opportunity to respond a certain way. And to me, like the perspective that we have ultimately dictates the way that we navigate the world around us. So
I love that message. And I feel like for some people, it's a tough pill to swallow that I'm 100% in charge of my thoughts and my emotions and my circumstances. And yes, you are
yeah,
100% in charge.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I have a few rapid fire questions I would like to ask you to wrap up the interview. And the first one is, what is a quote or motto that you live by?
So for me, like my favorite, probably paraphrasing it more than actually quoting it, but it's this idea of we can't learn that which we think we already know. Um, because to me, like I want to be a sponge. Like if I'm ever identifying myself as having learned everything there is to learn about a topic, I'm closed off to progressing anymore from it. And I would say that I identify more as a learner than someone who just knows all these things. So continuing to be the learner, you cannot learn that which you think you already know.
Yeah. And I think the key there is to be curious because you don't know what you don't
Yeah,
know. You know.
absolutely.
Second question would be, what is a book you're currently reading or highly recommend?
Um, I have, well, confession. I love books, but I hate to read, so bounce around a bit. But one of the books that I've recently started, it's actually behind me here. It's called Option B. It's by Adam Grant, but he talks about, coincidentally, resilience, um, and kind of working through difficult seasons, facing adversity and finding joy is kind of a subtext to it there. But it's Sheryl Sandberg and Adam Grant, and I'm a
Love
big
that.
Adam Grant fan.
I've never heard of either, but I'm like you, a sponge, always learning. I have books a mile high at this point. I need to get back on the reading train, like way more. But
Yeah.
love that book. Awesome. Final question for you: what advice would you give your younger self?
Hmm. Uh, I, it's tough. It's tough because I think I'm still learning. But I would say the difficulty or the struggle is worth the pursuit.
Mm,
In that, like, we can never determine the outcome, but we only have control over where we are in the journey. So the struggle being that no matter how difficult the season, the pursuit is worthwhile.
yes, I love that. Great note to end on. Thank you so much, Evan, for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.